Okay, great. So I think we have about 40 minutes before the next session, and I'm super pleased to see what's kind of a full-ish room. And the title of my talk is Why Quantum Safe Encryption is the Next Y2K and How to Be Ready, which is probably why you're here, because you have some interest in this topic. So what I really love about coming to these conferences as well, I really like sitting in rooms and being lectured by people. I don't like being the one in the front doing the lecturing. So there's a lot of super smart people here. There's a lot of people that have an interest in this topic. Presumably you all have some sort of interest in this topic. So don't be afraid to ask me a question. And if I fumble an answer or if it's at the edge of boundary of my knowledge, just chip in, okay? Right, this is all about collaboration. So what happened to my slide? Let me see if I can get PowerPoint. How many folks were at the last open source summit in Vienna? Little show of hands there, little show. Yeah, cool. A few. So, if we look at this, can you see this?
We can't hear you when you do that.
I know you can't. I'll grab my microphone. Thank you for that. How's that? No? Any better?
So if you look here, look, it's coming up, it's coming up. See a little animated GIF? Ready for that? This is the best part. Come on, that's Linus Torvald. Oh no, let me play it again.
Anyway, I was there. I was actually there. And I was so shocked when I was like booking for this that I actually appeared. Look, I wasn't in a room as big as Linus and all these wonderful keynote speakers. It's a really small, this is my like 0.15 second of fame. 5, 4, 3. Come on, move on. And that's me. Did you see it? You had to blink. You have to blink if you don't miss it. Wow, so that's super cool. And you know what? I'm a klutz when it comes to AV stuff, so I'm just going to do this. Okay, cool. So, and I gave this talk there. Was anybody at that talk or not? That's either a good sign or a bad sign. Either it was really bad or else you learned everything I needed to. So let me go on a little bit. So I titled this Y2K, Y2Q, and I'll just give a little bit of background here before I get into sort of encryption and quantum safe encryption or quantum resistant decryption, which is probably what you're here for. Looking around the room, we got some people in here was kind of my sort of age. I'm 58 years old, born in 1966. We've got a few of you maybe north of that. I'm not going to call you out, and probably a lot of younger people here as well. So Y2K was a problem that was essentially a computing problem that is basically around how dates were stored in computers, okay? So the very first company I went to work for, I was writing software for insurance, and are there any people who ever wrote in a language called COBOL in the room? You have a couple of COBOLs. Wow, you guys are too young to do COBOL, wow. Good for you, sir. Come in, please do. So within COBOL, this is what's known as data structure. So if you look, when I was writing insurance software, I basically have 2 digits to hold the year and a month and a day. And this particular piece of software, roughly speaking, that I was writing. And an insurance policy generally has an inception date and an expiry date. You buy it and it begins and it expires. Normally they go for a year or 364 days. Your next one will start on the calendar anniversary. And I remember writing logic that basically said, if the inception date is greater than the expiry date, display enter a valid policy date. Okay, or you might have a batch job that ran every morning that said, okay, send out letters for everybody whose insurance policy is about to expire, and maybe give them an offer, or maybe just, don't pay the claim because they made a claim after it expired. You can see that kind of math that's basically comparing dates. And one of the cool things about storing dates is that if you store date in year, month, day, we've got 2 dates here. We've got the 27th of August, 1989, which is the day I started work. And the 27th, no, it's not the year I started work, today's date wound back. 1990, you can see the policy incepted on the 27th of the 8th month, 89, expired on the 26th of the 8th, 90. So that's good to go, right? Your inception date is less than your expiry date. But once you wrap around the end of the millennium, which for some of us is in the distant past, what, 25 years ago, that no longer is valid, right? Because your 99 date becomes 00, and 00 is less than 99, so it breaks. And basically, humanity was doomed. So there was a huge effort called Y2K to basically try and fix that. The interesting thing about that is that people, they knew 1989. Think about it. the Millennium was only 11 years old, and I was still being paid good money by my employer at the time to basically write buggy software. And a lot of people made a lot of money out of fixing this bug, and fortunately humanity survived that. Or did it? So one of the interesting things, if you Google now, many citizens decided because nothing really happened, nothing had ever going to happen in the same place. There's a fable called, I think it's called The Boy Who Cried Wolf, or okay, which is about if you keep saying wolf, 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 and then everybody sort of goes to battle and nothing happens, eventually when the wolf comes, it eats your sheep, if you get it. So a lot of people now, and it's very much a world of fake news, and people are very sort of addicted to kind of dopamine sound bites. I did a search on Google before I came here, and Y2K and Y2K fake, Y2K scam, Y2K fraud are really trending right now, right? Which is bizarre, right? Because it was a very, very real problem. And it's just a little anecdote. Folks in here like astronomy? I'm kind of an astronomy nerd. On the plane on the way here, I sat next to a really smart guy who tried to convince me that the moon was hollow. And he wasn't trolling me. But it was quite fun. I actually sat around and talked about the math behind gravity and Euclid's law, and kind of proved to him that the density of the Earth and the escape velocity of the moon and the distance apart and everything, like, proved it was actually solid, the same density as us. I still couldn't convince him. But interestingly, another thing, airline keeps mistaking a 100-year-old woman for a baby. Y2K is not completely behind us. This is the story in the BBC News. This is the woman, bless her, and she was trying to book a plane ticket, and she entered her birth date of 102 years old, and it quite clearly showed it was two-year-old, and had a baby seat waiting for her rather than a wheelchair. So this is clearly a case of the fact that the Y2K is still with us because there are still computing systems out there that still can't handle that. That's clearly the two-digit date. So let's go forward. Do folks know what the year 2038 problem is? You probably do, yeah, you Linux guys, yeah. Okay, so this problem is, I will get back to quantum Y2Q. This is another problem. Fortunately, I'll have retired before then, but if we have a look at the right-hand corner, you see that date, it's all ones, boom, yeah, it's gone to 1000, so we've gone back to 1901. So in the year 2038, a lot of Linux kernels are basically toast. So get ready, because 2038 is effectively the Y2K problem, but differently. And again, I didn't know when the code was first written for it. So, interesting, I'm not here to talk about fixed storage of dates that results in logic errors. I'm here to talk about quantum-resistant decryption. So let's back on topic. Interestingly, quantum-resistant decryption, so I work for IBM, International Business Machines. I think I'm the only IBMer here. I keep walking around and looking for colleagues. Lots of Red Hat people here who I love and adore. They're a sort of IBM-owned company, but they've kept their own brand and identity, which is marvelous. IBM, we used to call it quantum safe encryption. And what's in a word? Interestingly, IBM actually sells and markets quantum computers for lots of very incredible things that quantum computers can do. They're very good for sort of modeling proteins and weather and sort of algorithms based upon sort of quantum state when you're dealing with things. And interestingly, if you say something is quantum safe, you're implying that the quantum brand is a dangerous brand, right? It's kind of like don't touch the third rail. So it's now called quantum resistant decryption, which is quantum is strong, but the encryption that we use is stronger than the adversary. And it's an interesting weird thing. It freaks me out every time some marketing people, but I kind of get it. Who was around I had a bit of animation there that all went wrong. Who remembers a movie called Back to the Future, 1985? Yes. Do you want to tell us about the plot of Back to the Future, or I'll tell you for it? It's a marvelous film. Please go and watch it. It's great. It's got Marty McFly and stuff like that. But the fundamental idea behind Back to the Future is within 1985. I'll try and imagine I have a laser pointer and I'm pointing at Marty McFly on the left. Has a time machine, and they want to use it for good. And somebody gets in the time machine, Biff McTannen, and he basically goes to the future and he steals all the sports results from the future, comes back in time, and he's now able to place bets. So what you've got is information that was available in the future. You're able to bring back in time and make yourself sort of a super baddie. And it's a fun film. I won't spoil it too much, but it's a good film. It's a good film to watch. And I think there's 3 of them that were made. One, Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3. And the third one is one of my favorites because they're Wild West. It's all sort of Monument Valley and in Arizona and stuff like that. So that bit of PowerPoint animation, nobody was around when the Spartans won their war. So basically, Sparta and Athens, about 445 to 415 BC, had a war called the Peloponnesian War. And everybody thinks that, so within humanity, there are basically 20 conflicts that have shaped humanity. If you go, sort of, there are books written about this and stuff. 20 sort of pivotal conflicts that have basically sort of torched an empire or given birth to something new, only in all of humanity, sort of recorded humanity. There are probably earlier ones when sort of 2 people in 2 separate caves were kind of throwing rocks at each other. Sparta had about 300 hoplites, and there were about thousands and thousands of Athenians, and they beat them. And popular, well, God, I sound like the moon is hollow guy. You know, popular theory says that the Spartans were really kind of just, you know, kind of very sort of buff and strong, and they wrestled bears and things like that, and they just basically beat. That's sort of true, but it's sort of also not true as well. They were the sort of first people to invent something called a transposition cipher. And the transposition cipher is an interesting cipher. So it's called a sikile, which is actually Greek for baton. And what you're basically doing is you want to give information to somebody else, and what they would do is effectively write a word like OSS Europe, Y2K, and you write it, if you imagine you're writing it on a piece of sort of hide wrapped around a stick, you just write it out. You write your message and you rotate it and write it and rotate it and rotate it, and then you give somebody else that strip of paper, and they go running, you know, to your other camp where you need to give the message, and then they go, well, what the heck is this? And they have a stick of similar diameter, of similar shape, and they wrap it around and they can decode that message. Okay? And if you read books about cryptography and conflict, that gave a massive, massive advantage, because if you know what your enemy and your adversary, well, first of all, if they don't know what you're doing, you know, you can surprise them and go, ha, ambush, or you can sort of move, you know, supply lines around and basically just kind of, you know, mess with them, win the sort of psychological war. But also, if you, as the opponent in that, are able to decode what they've gone and done, then it's a level playing field. Everything is reset. And that's effectively transposition cipher, which is one of 2 types of ciphers available. And it really gave birth to cryptography and cryptanalysis, which is basically the way in which you can encrypt data, and then cryptography is basically this cryptanalysis, the sport of trying to decrypt data. Okay. So within the traditional design thinking sort of actors and actresses you have is Alice has some information that she wants to share with Bob. Bob wants to share information with Alice, and Eve is the bad actor here. And you want to make sure that Eve cannot see that information. That's a fundamental premise behind cryptography, cryptanalysis. Okay. The American Civil War, interestingly, do we have any Americans in the room? That was a very slow hand raise. That was a very slow hand. You're just like, dude, it's a safe space. It's like, I'm sorry. Anyway, yeah, but welcome. The American Civil War. It's interesting, when you go to the US, they really don't talk so much about the European wars, even though the US did a huge amount to end both wars. But the American Civil War, 1861, 1865, awful lot of people. 620,000 dead, 1.5 million casualties, awful. But the most interesting thing about the Civil War was not the kinetic war that took place, but it really was the intelligence war. This is just me, because I nerd out on intelligence. It's what I enjoy doing. They invented something called a root cipher. And the root cipher is fundamentally, imagine that shape that's going across, yeah, sort of that way. You invent a shape, and your shape is basically your root cipher, and you're transposing something, and then you can transpose it again with multiple shapes. And you keep applying a cipher again and again and again, and you get what's called a transposition cipher as well. So you're transposing it, but you're also substituting it as well. Okay? And that basically gave the winning force a massive advantage, so that the Confederacy And then Abraham Lincoln won basically the 1860s presidential election, and the rest is history up until now. 1876, did they at school, they teach you about Rutherford versus Hayes or not? I'm looking at my American friend. No, Rutherford versus Hayes. Maybe this is out of the textbooks. Anyway, so this is really interesting to study. And basically what happened was, this is why the Electoral College was introduced. There was a massive amount of fraud buying and a massive vote buying and a massive amount of fraud. And basically, columnar transposition was sort of invented. And I've got a little bit here, and the slides are animated. But what you're fundamentally doing is you're picking a word, a seed word. In this case, it was Vienna, because I haven't redone these slides since last year. Sorry about that. Was that a chuckle? And sort of, anyway, but I'll do the first one. And this was broken by a mathematician, Edward Holden, in 1846. And he basically broke it using sort of depth attacks and fundamentally brute force analysis. So he was the first person to sort of prove that even if you don't have the stick, because the Spartans were running across with the stick. By the way, these are all examples of what's called symmetric encryption, which is where you use something to encrypt something, and then the other person at the other end has to know how you encrypted it to decrypt it. Okay? Asymmetric encryption, which I'll come onto, is kind of like a little bit different, right? He used a depth attack, and he was the first person using a depth attack. And he was, I guess, the first sort of mathematician on the field of kind of conflict to prove that you don't need generals to win wars, you just need smart people, right? You need smart mathematicians. And it really gave birth to a lot of kind of intelligence agencies across the world. The presidential was one. Interestingly, columnar transposition actually then, if you do what's called double columnar transposition, so you just transpose it again, it just gets harder to break. It just fundamentally gets harder to break. You just need more compute power to break it, okay? And interestingly, this is basically the basis for a huge amount of encryption, is that all you're doing is you're just transposing it once with a seed, and then you're transposing it again and again and again. And the more often you do that with the bigger things, just the harder it is for compute power to break it. Double column transition was actually used a lot in the 20th century, all the way up for sort of Soviet spies with using double transposition. It was broken, it was busted, and interestingly, the people who broke it didn't reveal to their adversary that they'd broken it, right? The most important thing in spycraft is not the information, it's the source of the information. But you have to be really, really careful about, because then if you reveal the source of the information, they go, oh, that's our mole, or that's our vulnerability, that's our attack vector. You can just close it down. So it's very, very important in spycraft to not do that. Let me go on a little bit, and probably the most famous example of this, so this was all intelligence agencies were busting this. Pretty much the Cold War, I would maintain, ended for a number of reasons, but certainly the US were basically just reading all of the Soviet telegrams, literally in plain text. They absolutely smashed it. And slightly before that, probably everybody know who this beautiful man is, Alan Turing. Wonderful man for lots and lots of different reasons. And that's the Enigma machine that that's the sort of Nazi Germany we're using. And to basically, and the interesting thing about this is when you study this, I'm going on for time, I'm about halfway through, is that, again, there's a wonderful film called The Imitation Game, which is sort of fictional. It's got Keira Knightley and Benedict Cumberbatch in it, playing some really, really good roles. Lots of wonderful sort of kind of British actors and actresses. But the interesting thing about this is just having broken the code, the most important thing to do, the mission was to end the war. So they didn't use it to just, they didn't fritter it away. And interestingly, so this is basically based upon huge amounts of columnar transposition. You have to reseed every day. Interestingly, there's two interesting things I just want to introduce here. They've got nothing to do with quantum encryption, but I love this subject. When the code was first broken, they needed to know a keyword that would be used in lots of transmissions. So the fictional but untrue story, I really sound more and more like the moon is hollow guy, but this is that there was supposed to be somebody who signed off every particular message with a particular sort of, phrase. And I just won't repeat it here because it's a very offensive phrase. That's not the true story. The true story is for an entire day, no Allied bombs were dropped. Because you can go to Bletchley Park, by the way, where they actually have signs about this. And the Allies bombed a lighthouse. A lighthouse is a really stupid thing to bomb because they're very, very strong. They're kind of storm resistant. You're not going to do anything. You might break the glass. I'll just repair it. It's no military target particularly to break up. But because they just bombed the lighthouse, which, anybody German can tell me what the word for lighthouse is? Leuchtturm. It's, okay. It's got quite a few letters in it. Yeah. Okay, that's a shrug there. But the word lighthouse had never really been used, but it was now used in all of the chatter. So many messages. It's like, my lighthouse is, what are we going to do about the lighthouse, lighthouse, lighthouse? And that was effectively the way that they knew that they'd broken the code. The same happened, the US did it in Battle of Midway. So when they were massively outnumbered by the Japanese after Pearl Harbor, the Japanese, I think, had like 5 aircraft carriers, 3 of which were bigger than the biggest US ones. It was just cat and mouse, and the US were terrified. There was a particular island, and they basically effectively tricked the Japanese into saying this island had run out of water, and then the Japanese had their 3 aircraft carriers going towards the island, laden, and everybody was laden for a land invasion, and then they did a sneak attack, and basically just won. And again, there's a very good film about that as well, but there's also better history about it as well. And that was the same in that they knew the word that the Japanese had for the island, which was a code, it was WH code word, and then they used the word water, and from that they were able to reverse, and then they were basically able to snarf all of the traffic and basically win the pivotal battle of the Pacific. Let's move on. Claude Shannon, 1916, has a Nobel Prize for cryptography, and he was basically the foundation of DES and AES. Sorry for me nerding out on history. Anyway, let's go back. So we talked about symmetric encryption. Alice talks to Bob and Tim and Janet. So interestingly, if you think about a lot of, symmetric encryption is very, very useful if you're doing something like you're storing data on disk, or you're signing something with a key, and then maybe you download a file and you just have to verify that that file hasn't been tampered with. So cryptographic signing is very, very good for. A lot of the internet, I sound like my mother, a lot of the internet, anyway, e-commerce and things, anything is basically a central computer connecting to multiple clients. Hello, sir. Oh, I'm going to play a video soon. Yes, hopefully it's going to work. Thank you so much for coming, sir. Thank you. Thank you. You guys are in for a treat. It's a good video. I'm glad you waited. So the problem that you have with symmetric encryption is that if Alice gives her symmetric key to Tim and Bob and Janet, then Tim can see the traffic meant for Bob, and Bob can see the traffic meant for Janet. The server has to trust all of the clients. It just doesn't work in a sort of distributed kind of one-to-n computing architecture. So that's where asymmetric encryption comes in, which is effectively where what you do is you basically have a private key that Alice will hold on to, and then Alice will have a public key and share that public key with everybody, and then the public key, and depending on how the cipher's used, which is basically the cipher is your stick, effectively, the diameter of your stick and the holes in the stick. Just think of that as what a cipher is, fundamentally. Effectively, how big that cipher is, how complex that cipher is. But she won't share her private key, she will share a public key, which basically means that you can't see anybody else's data, right? That was basically meant for another client, right? Okay? So that's a fundamental. Interestingly, folks know what Diffe-Hellman is or not? So the key handshake, great. So the fundamental, Diffe-Hellman is phenomenal if you want to read up more about Diffe-Hellman. And I do have lots and lots of links at the end to stuff where you can nerd out on the plane home if you want to. But basically, Diffe-Hellman is the fact that an interesting thing is if 2 computers are going to talk to each other in a way that people in the middle can't snarf the data, they want to. Asymmetric encryption is very, very expensive. It's actually very, very slow. You don't really want to be shuttling lots of things. I'm streaming video across asymmetric encryption. It's just going to be very, very slow, very, very compute intensive, or even anything particularly, or a picture or something. Maybe text you can deal at kind of internet speeds. So what you do is you have an asymmetric encryption that's, i.e. it's non-snarfable, so that nobody else looking in the middle, the kind of man in the middle or person in the middle attack, can go, oh, now I'm going to observe all of this. You negotiate your ciphers between the 2 computers, and then what happens is Alice will basically give a private one-off symmetric key across that asymmetric channel to Bob, and then Bob goes, ta-da, I've got that, and then they have that conversation across symmetric encryption. So that's how Diffe-Hellman works. And it works very, very well. It's the fundamental basis behind TLS, transport layer security, which is used to secure sockets, so HTTPS, all that great stuff, FTTPS, is all done across transport layer security, and it's also used for SSH keys. So if you SSH your way into something and you've got like a SHA key or 2 basically, and you've given, you hold your private key, you give your public key, when you basically connect to it, looking in the sort of known
is it the authorized hosts file or one of the files like that? And basically, as a handshake occurs, it goes, oh, I know who's coming in now because they're basically giving me the key store, and therefore I can validate that I hold the public key. And then you go back and you go, well, is this a public key for your private key? And it goes, yes, it is. And you go, boom, yeah, and you're straight in. And that's really, really good because that's basically the end of people using passwords, because passwords are just bad, because passwords get stolen. Passwords are a huge attack vector. Okay, now the fundamental basis behind or cryptography is based upon three sort of problems, and they get harder to fit on a slide. The first one is integer factorization. Folks are familiar with integer factorization. Is that any number could be basically be broken down into integers to the power of other integers. And if you can't, you just keep breaking it down. You keep breaking it down. I've got a little example of 72, which I think is basically, what have I got? It's like 2 to the 3. Actually, my equal sign might be a bit wrong. Anyway, it's 2 to the 3 times 3 to the 3. And it's hard to break when you've got prime factorization. So if you have two prime numbers that are fairly similar in size, and you multiply them together, so there's only one unique prime, it just happens to be, from a mathematical point of view, it's extremely difficult to break integer factorization with a traditional computer. It was supposed to be safe for about 300 years, based upon sort of Moore's law and compute power. Okay? Discrete logarithm, I won't know too much about this, but if you're into it, and even if you've forgotten the math you learned at school and you want to brush up, it's not that hard to do. And there's some really, really good videos. And then we have elliptic curve, which is the most recent one. So everybody thought that all the data, and this is all the data. So if I think about, I think this might be, so I'm just getting used to, I don't present that often. And this is like sort of real time. This is the website. It's quite a good website, every second, the internet. And it basically, it shows you roughly how much data is being created, how much traffic there is between computers, how many online transactions, so that'll be, a banking transaction, moving money between accounts, buying a coffee, buying a car, e-commerce sales, and things like that. That's an awful lot, and that's all relying on those three fundamental algorithms. And the world was good until this came along. So this, keep an eye on time. This is a quantum computer. Has anybody here seen a quantum computer? For real? You have? Awesome. Have you worked with them or not?
No, it's just not yet.
Oh, it's just not. Are you another IBM in the room? Oh, I'm so disappointed. Sorry, I'm messing with you. I mean, quantum computers are phenomenal. It's really, really exciting. There's a huge field of computing that they do. This talk is about quantum encryption, but fundamentally, the thing that blows my mind about quantum computer, I mean, most people know roughly what a transistor is. It's like a gate, a PNP gate. You're basically stuffing electrons underneath something, effectively, a plate, and saying, if there's lots of them, it's negatively charged, and if there's none of them, it's positively charged, right? That's the PN bit. And from that, you can create AND, XOR, gates, and so on and so forth. Quantum computers are very cold. They run about 4 degrees Kelvin, which is, Celsius, and you guys know what Kelvin is. 0 degrees Kelvin is minus 273 degrees centigrade, so it's very, very cold, okay? And at that temperature, everything sort of slows down a little bit, where you actually put one electron in a transistor, effectively, right? They're called qubits. And because that's one electron only, that will exhibit quantum state, okay? So there's quantum state about its spin, and it's about uncertainty as to whether it's actually there or not there, or charged or not charged. And you also get quantum tunneling as well, which is another effect of quantum. So what they're very good at doing is, so in a classical computer, when you've got 2 gates, you've basically got 16 states. 4 qubits in superposition, you've got more, and basically once you've got 20 qubits, if you have what's called 20 qubits, you can store basically 1 million values in parallel, because you effectively program the quantum computer with the gates that you want to, and just watch it, and it simultaneously expresses all of the states at once, and then you basically measure that. You can also now, there's another branch of using quantum computers, they're using photons and mirrors, right? And then at that very, very small scale, basically the photons display state. So you can the photon is shone at a mirror, and under some circumstances it bounces off, and under some it just goes through the mirror, and basically tunnels through the mirror. And then effectively you have, it's not photographic plates, it's receptors. You can basically see all of the possible results for running all of the possible permutations of that program. So if you think of a program that's got lots of if this, if that, lots of different inputs into that program, you are capturing all of them simultaneously just by going click. It's mind-blowing. And it's very, very good for things where you want to do. Interestingly, so 56 qubits computers exist, and then the Quantinuum was like 20 last year. That was a 100-fold increase. So this stuff is moving, flying along, and it's not following Moore's law. It's following a sort of whole different law. If anybody hasn't, and we wanted to find out more about quantum computing, IBM has a site called quantum.ibm.com, and you can just go here, and it's really, really fun, and there's lots of software available and lots of samples, and it's fun to do, and you can do it with your kids as well. If you have or whoever, somebody who's kind of smart at math and wants to geek out, this really is phenomenal. And it's not just IBM, obviously huge numbers of companies are investing in quantum computing. And then there's QSKit as well. So this is fun. This is the good side of quantum computing. This man came along in 1994 and said, you know what, just for grins, let me go and see if I can create an algorithm to create those three fundamental things: the discrete logarithmic problem, the elliptic curve, and the last one, I've just forgotten what it is, the prime factorization. And this man called Peter Shaw, he's a mathematician. And I love mathematicians, but they're also, think about all those people who through time were able to break codes, win the Spartan War or tip the war, U-boat war. Peter Shaw basically created something called Shaw's algorithm. And he basically proved that it could be broken. Interestingly, it can't be broken by any computer, quantum computer that exists today, to the best of my knowledge. Okay? There's a very interesting article here about this, and if anybody wants to read this, I recommend that you do, because it actually has Shaw's algorithm here, and you can actually go to that website I created earlier if you want to, and you can actually program Shaw's algorithm. Okay? And you could take a weak kind of RSA 128, and you could bust it if you wanted to. You can't yet do RSA 256. Interestingly, I was going to add something interesting about busting that now. No. So where does that leave us? Right. So yes and no. We are sort of doomed, because if you think back to my Back to the Future analogy, what we have right now is a real threat, and the real threat is called harvest now, decrypt later. And what's happening right now is that people are lifting data. I read in the news, somebody goes, oh, a hotel chain got hacked. The data got lifted. Don't worry, it was encrypted. Like, Yabu sucks, right? Trust me, that encrypted data is being stored somewhere so that at some point in time in the future, somebody can harvest that. And it's full of PI, it's full of personal information, it's full of social security information that people can use to impersonate identities, people can use to blackmail. And also, if you can snarf data on the wire as well, then you can cook up new data on the wire, right? If I make a payment to you of, I don't know, like €3 because you buy me a coffee, and somebody else would be like, oh, actually, I'm going to give you like 3,000 euros, right? I mean, you really can. I mean, it's that whole, those sort of superhero movies where somebody walks up and says, oh, I've got something that can open every lock, or I got something that will, it's effectively what you've got, right? Quantum computers using Shaw's algorithm basically means that everything that you assume is secure today is not. Right, so you should sort of be scared, but also be empowered. So interestingly, I'm just keeping a track on time. I think I finished at 45. When AES was first created, that was done in 1997 because DS had been broken, and that was done by NIST, which was created specifically to try and pull together different people who said, you know what, let's not try and patent or patent this idea, or let's not go commercial, let's try and get the smartest minds together. And they basically had this kind of call to arms in 2017, and they basically had a sort of 5-year contest to come up with what's called PQC, post-quantum cryptography. And anybody who know who this man is? It's Chira Inouye from Rogue One. Come on, Star Wars fans. Stay with me, yeah? So a bunch of nerds at IBM created something called Kyber crystals, and this is obviously Star Trek and Spock. I say to people now, and they're like, who? Dilithium crystals. So they were all named after different crystals.
And basically what happened was there are 4 quantum-resistant cryptographic algorithms that have been created. I could try and play, I did promise you a video, so let me see if it works. We have no sound. Sound guy, can you? No worries, I'll carry on. It's not that interesting. Basically, it's just a little thing talking about, you're all doomed, but you're sort of not all doomed because these quantum safe encryptions do exist. So find out about them. They're all fundamentally varieties on these 6. One of them is actually, and they are believed to be quantum safe. So depending on Post-Quantum Cryptography Alliance, if you're into this field, Post-Quantum Cryptography Alliance is good. Every single vendor that I know, right from Google to Broadcom to IBM to whoever, is all trying to make sure that the world, we don't all basically lose our data to bad actors. Data is being stolen today, so even today, it's really important to make sure that you harden down everything. If you think, I live in the UK, and there's so many times that people go, oh, there's a ransomware attack. And I'll be like, yeah, well, they were running like Windows XP, right, with like, Java 6 or something. What did you expect was going to happen? And that's really because some business says, we're probably very much on the bleeding and leading edge. We're very aware of like CVEs and patching everything. But there's a huge amount of humanity that's just left so far behind. I really don't know what's going to happen when, bad actors get hold of quantum computers. But they're obviously going to attack the soft targets first. Interesting if you write C drivers and drivers for get involved with this. There are C libraries how to do quantum. By the way, quantum cryptography is slow. So I just let you know that there is specialized hardware just as that much. If I was to bring up a video on this laptop, right, and run it minimized, right, it's not as quick as if I just max them. If my video card is really good at running video, if I ran it where the software was doing the rendering, it's not going to be as fast as specialized hardware, right? You have I/O hardware, you have video hardware. So there was hardware being created. I'm not here to sell you IBM stuff, but IBM and many other people, EMC and stuff, make specialized hardware and specialized machines that will do that cryptography for you. Because if you're a developer in a high-level language, like maybe Python or JavaScript or something like that, the interpreted languages, or even Java to a certain extent, and you start running the quantum safe algorithms, the post-quantum resistant, your performance is going to tank, okay? And you're going to take lots and lots of the hits. It's much better to just let the sort of container, the envelope in which you're running, to do that for you. It can just do a much better job. And it can also be more upgradable. I was going to try playing one more video. How are we doing for videos? Video man, you ready? Let's hit this. Let's try, see if this works. It doesn't work. No worries. Oh, that's such a shame, because that was my highlight. This is a mythical trailer for Back to the Future 3. I'll try and do. And Martin McFly is saying, imagine if you could go to the future. What would you do? If you could go to the past, what would you do? Well, because I have to plug that in. That's my HTML. Yeah, no worries. And he's talking about, going back to the past. And you can see Times Square, everything tearing back down. It's okay. We're good. I want to be respectful of people's time. 43 minutes. And he's going on, and he's like, and that's really my call to you, is that what would you do if you could go back in time, right? And you probably do and the very last bit of the line, it's much more dramatic when Martin McFly says, what would you do? That's a really bad accent. You help me with the accent there, I'm not quite sure. What would you do? That's really bad as well. So apologies to my American friends. What would you do? What could you change? And this is a very interesting thing to question. Most people, when you say, if I had a time machine, you would probably go back in time and change events before future harm. You would pick your favorite bad guy, and basically go to his school playground and maybe, biff him or something, right? Or there's actually a really good film, I think it was called Looper, had lots of time travel, which is where, they go back, and anyway, I don't want to spoil that, it's a really good film. It's a good ending. I didn't see it. Did you see it coming? No. When you watch films like Tenant, when you watch films about time travel or Doctor Who, you're watching them and everything's going really badly, and you're like, they've got a time machine, right? And I'm pretty sure so they're going to get out of it. But it's a really good kind of wild card to have. It's like if you're playing Uno or Reversi or something, you just go, yeah, I've got a joker.
just morph it into any card. Most people would want to do that. But the fundamental thing is we have to protect today's data from tomorrow's bad actors. So even though quantum decryption hasn't occurred yet, and I say that because I actually believe it has, but I'm not going to convince you the moon is hollow today. It's very important. You have to look at everything. Harden your encryption algorithms today. By the way, does anybody here work on SSH handshake? You know there's been all sorts of bugs where like two computers negotiate the cipher key to each other, and there was a really interesting attack where somebody was able to inject into that negotiation code to downgrade everybody. So it went straight to the bottom. So all of that data was being snuffed. From an intellectual point of view, well, that's gorgeous. But from a like, oh my goodness, you're just stealing my bank account money. I mean, that happens all the time. I mean, there are huge state actors, very, very well funded, very, very smart individuals doing this today. Do you want me to convince you the moon is hollow? No? How much time do we have? I'm 1 minute over. I'm trying to convince you here that the moon is hollow. So folks know what a solar winds hack, right? It's the solar winds. Okay, so after solar winds, it was basically a hack of supply chain, and it hit lots of US government agencies. So it was effectively a clear and present danger to the USA, right? So the USA were able to basically militarize the response to that. The USA paid off the bad actors to get the ransomware keys. That went into Bitcoin. That Bitcoin wallet was emptied, not by the criminals. So my moon is hollow conspiracy theories and National Security Agency already have quantum computers, and they went, because by the way, all Bitcoin, all cryptocurrencies, all NFTs, they're toast, they're worthless, okay? The second you wake up and you realize that quantum computing has happened. And this is my real ask to all of you, is make the future better for all of us here today and tomorrow. Are there any questions before you all applause and leave to your next talk? No? You have a question, sir? Go for it.
I don't know if the answer is clear, but let's say I encrypt my hard drive today with an RSA key 2048 bits.
Okay, so your question was, if you encrypt your hard drive with an RSA 2048 key.
When will they be able to read it?
So popular theory is 2030, which is just around the corner. We're coming to the end of 2025, so 4 years. But I'm pretty sure if the NSA or a large government agency of a Five Eyes nation got hold of that hard drive, because you'd done something really terrible, they could probably decrypt it. I think the, actually, RSA 2048, I think, was broken by a quantum computer in, I think, 22 hours. That's a state-of-the-art quantum computer, state-of-the-art 56-qubit quantum computer. I think it broke it in 22 hours, yeah. So you got 22 hours to basically, get to your place that hasn't got an extradition treaty. Yeah, so good luck. Thanks everybody for my talk. If anybody has improvements, hit me up, hunt me down on LinkedIn or something. And if anybody wants to talk to me a bit more about this, because I'm being quite reserved, because obviously there might be a bad actor in the room, I can tell you a little bit more maybe than I'm revealing. But this is really exciting field. Be scared, but also be greedy. It's a massive opportunity for us to not screw up. And also we have to educate people about this, like yourself. You have 22 hours. You can get better encryption algorithms than RSA 248. It's a fairly weak one. Yeah. Thanks for your question. And if people want to go, please go. I'll be the last to leave the room. Thank you for coming, sir. Yeah. Cheers.